Welcome to Tools, Talents, and Techniques. I'm your host, Dustin Sutton, and today we are joined by Mr. James Pitts. He's the principal at Greenwood Commercial Real Estate Group. Greenwood is a national commercial real estate services company. It's licensed or has affiliates in 16 states with offices in some major cities like Atlanta, DC, Detroit, Denver, and Philadelphia. And they focus on tenant buyer representation in the areas of office, industrial, retail, and land transactions for local markets. It serves for large corporate users with multiple locations. James is a seasoned professional with over 26 years of progressive experience and an impressive track record with several industry-leading companies. His background in education, he has a degree in electrical engineering from Texas A&M. He has an MBA in finance, marketing, and strategy from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. And he has a unique blend of technical expertise and business acumen. He had roles with JLL, Motorola, Starwood, Procter Gamble, and Johnson Controls, just to name a few. And in this conversation, you can see how his experience as well as his upbringing has shaped him into an accomplished problem solver. And now he's definitely a thought leader in the industry. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. So without any further ado, here he is, Mr. James Pitts. James Pitts, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dustin. Great to be here.
I'd like to start with you introducing yourself and just say a little bit about who you are and what you currently do.
Got it. James Pitts. I sit in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm one of the co-founders of Greenwood CRE, a national commercial real estate services firm. I've been in the commercial real estate industry about 28 years. I'm originally from West Texas. Friday Night Lights is where I grew up in that part of Texas. Recovering electrical engineer from Texas A&M. MBA. I used to work as an engineer, MBA from Northwestern in finance and strategy. Got my start at Sheraton Hotels and then Jones Lang LaSalle, heading up multiple accounts across the Southeast and one national account. And I did a stint with Grubb & Ellis after JLL. I did a stint with Johnson Controls Global Workplace Solutions, where I did global outsourced real estate solutions for huge companies all over the world. And then I was with Sodexo for a bit, and then then I was also the head of development for H.J. Russell here in Atlanta for a little while. Then went back into private practice in 2021, or actually before that, and started Greenwood CRE back in 2021, and we have been growing explosively.
Okay, that's it. That's the end of the show. You just said everything there is. No, I'm just kidding. You mentioned first that you said Friday Night Lights. Did you grow up in sports culture? Is that something that
literally, I've never seen any of those movies, any of that, because I was at those games. We played against Odessa Permian, and so, but the only sport I didn't play was football. I played everything else: track, baseball, basketball. I didn't play tennis or golf, but the major food groups out in Texas is football, then basketball and baseball. And then I played basketball at Texas A&M.
Oh, very nice. I wasn't aware of that. That's awesome. So when you mentioned being an electrical engineer, was that your plan in high school? Did you already know that that's what you wanted to do?
Actually, in 8th grade, my dad said, "Son, pick something that will train you. You may not like it, but you can always get a job in." He said, "You're really good at science and math. What about being an engineer?" I didn't know what an engineer was. 8th grade, I chose that. I worked at that all through high school, and I went to Texas A&M on a full academic scholarship for electrical engineering.
How did you choose Texas A&M? What was that? Were you choosing between other places, or was that the one place you wanted to go?
I had a bunch of offers from a bunch of different schools. I had some basketball offers as well, but I chose the academic route. And A&M was like Georgia Tech's a big engineering school here in Georgia. and A&M was known as the engineering school in Texas. And my grandfather went to Prairie View A&M. He was a valedictorian there. My father went to Prairie View A&M, and then I ended up at Texas A&M. And actually, it's where I met my wife. So last week would have been the 40th anniversary of us meeting and becoming best friends and being married 25 years in June.
Wow, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
How'd you meet?
She walked by and one of my buddies asked her to shoot pool, and she stopped, and we became friends, and 12 years later we got together.
Was she good at pool?
She never beat me until about 5 years ago. So
gotcha.
she's actually good at pool.
Yeah, well, it took a while for her to beat you, but either way, I think you both made it work. So when you're in college, you're studying electrical engineering, and once you were taking your classes, did you figure out what that next step was when you were there? Were you already trying to figure that out?
No, man. I mean, back in those days, it was your parents would say, "Get a good job, work there for 30 years, get a pension, and retire." Right. So, just getting through electrical engineering was hard enough, and then I'm in oil country, so I had a bunch of companies that wanted me to go work for oil companies, but I ended up working for a company called it was owned by Monsanto. I used to automate manufacturing plants using mainframes. And then later on, I went to go work at Motorola, and I worked on microchips. So, but that wasn't my bag. I was really good at it. I won national awards, but I just didn't. It didn't light my fire. So I needed to go into the witness protection program, which is either you get a law degree or an MBA, because otherwise you get typecast as an engineer. And I wish I had done the joint JD MBA. And back then, Kellogg was number one in the world. And I got accepted to Kellogg and loved it. Excellent experience.
So when you were making that decision, can you kind of walk through that decision making process? Like what other, you were weighing different options in what you were going to do, and what was the thing that put you over the top to go there?
So I knew I had been in engineering about 5 years, just couldn't see a future in it. I saw people who've been working there for 10, 15, 20 years. And I just thought, I don't want to be that guy, and I need something different. So I have a high risk tolerance. So I basically moved, applied. I got into a bunch of business schools and took the best one that I could find, which was number one. And made that move to Chicago, man. And if I could do it again, I'd do it all over.
And you mentioned that what you were previously doing didn't light your fire. And that resonates deeply with me, because all the steps that I've taken into my career, like I go into something and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Then after a while, maybe this isn't for me. How do you go about measuring that? Like, what energizes you? Is there a specific process that you go through, or?
It's one of those things, you know it when you feel it, you know it when you see it. And here's the thing, man, like I had an engineering degree, then I got an MBA. And so somebody asked me once, like, man, like you don't seem to be afraid to jump out and be an entrepreneur. And I said, well, based on my experience, my education, how far could I fall? Like now at some point when you get to a certain age, you can fall pretty far because you age out. But so I felt like my engineering and my MBA gave me the platform to take risk. And I've jumped out and been an entrepreneur. I've gone back into corporate. I've jumped out. And so, and what I'll say is that MBA teaches you to make other people money. You become, you're a manager. And so they take really smart people and you're being trained to make other people money. When I got into commercial real estate, the creativeness of it, the ability to be my own source of income, just it's different every time. Loved it. I just felt at home. And so when you think about it as an engineer, I'm a problem solver by nature. So if I can be strategic and solve problems, and I'm a people person too. So real estate's all about people at the end of the day. It's like the trifecta for me.
What was your introduction to commercial real estate or to real estate in general?
So interesting you say that. So my family, we still own some land in East Texas that my grandpa for over 100 years. So as you know, African Americans, I think we peaked at ownership of land after slavery, probably in the 1920s, and after that we began to lose land. My grandfather, who I'm named after, bought land in Texas, Oklahoma. We still have 117 acres where I was born. And so and then he bought land in the town that I was born in, to be frank, in the white part of town, not across the tracks where the black people lived. And he owned the whole city block and he had houses on it. So as a kid, I was telling somebody the other day, I actually never took vacation. Like I think we went to Disney once when I was little, when I was like 5. But other than that, you go see family, or we would go to East Texas because I lived in West Texas, and we would work on our rent houses every summer. So I learned a lot about carpentry and painting and being a landlord for my dad. And but I never really thought about it as a career, didn't see it, and definitely didn't understand commercial. Like even though I took some commercial real estate finance classes, it just never clicked for me. You know, when you drive by buildings, who owns it, who manages it, you know, what's the money flow, who's putting those people. Just it was like the biggest. It was like right in front, the elephant in front of me that I didn't see.
Mm-hmm. And so you had exposure to it, but then after those years and you're doing these different things, when did you come back to it? When did you?
So
When did you open your eyes to it?
when I got out of, so here's what's funny. When I got out of business school, well, I went to Sheraton Hotel. So I was in real estate in the hotel business. We got bought by Starwood, and they asked me to stay, but they said, if you want to go, we'll give you, because you're an executive of the firm, we'll give you. I actually came to San Diego my very first day of working for Sheraton. We had our annual meeting out there. So they said, you know, as an executive, you can take the golden parachute or you can stay. I took the golden parachute. I had some cash in my pocket, and I had a buddy who was buying and selling houses in Atlanta. So I ended up buying houses and apartments, and I'd lease some, I'd renovate some and sell them. And so I was in that real estate game, but I still hadn't really paid attention to commercial. And you're about to ask me how I got into it. A classmate of mine from Kellogg called me up and said, hey, we're opening up the JLL office in Atlanta. We need to hire some folks. We only hire MBAs. Would you be interested in interviewing? And I was like, I don't know anything about commercial. He said, you got an MBA from Kellogg. You're an engineer, and you do know you're already in real estate. Come interview. So I went to JLL, interviewed. I was the fastest promoted vice president that they had ever had. I think I got promoted to VP in 6 months. And my first big deal was supposed to be a 20,000 square foot office deal. It turned to 80,000 square feet. And I did it in 3 weeks. And nobody knew I was doing it except my friend who hired me. And I walked into my manager, and 3 weeks later, and I said, hey, here's the deal signed. I did a swing lease. I did some other stuff. He said, wait a minute, this should have taken you 3 or 4 months. I said, the CEO wanted to get it done. So we did 80,000 square foot office deal in 3 weeks. And after that, man, they just turned me loose at JLL, and it was a wrap.
Oh, that's amazing. How old were you at this time?
Oh man, when I started JLL, I was, man, 30, in my 30s. Oh gosh.
So maybe like earlier mid 30s.
Yeah. Early. Yeah. Actually, I was. It was early mid 30s.
And so, well,
I'm getting old, man. Don't ask me all those questions.
Well, no, I want to put a reference, because if you're just starting out in commercial real estate at that age, but you're coming with a lot of life experience into that, and having those credentials, and like you said, they only hire MBAs. You brought a lot into it, but then to be able to use those transferable skills and see immediate success. I mean, there's a great lesson in that, and just having that background, and maybe you didn't have it figured out quite yet, but you could use all of that into your next step.
Man, to this day, I love leases. I get excited when I see a good lease. So like I took on learning leases. I worked with the attorneys. I understood the project management side from my engineering side, and I just loved it. Like I just became a commercial real estate nerd like overnight.
Wow. So, and you mentioned because of your background in engineering and you're a problem solver, could you talk a little bit about how that really does influence the way you look at things now?
Yeah, so that gives you process, that gives you the ability to, or me the ability to look beyond. And with the MBA, at the end of the day, you're really solving uh, business problems with real estate. And if you can get beyond the mechanics of the transaction and understand how the real estate supports the business objectives, to me, that used engineering, MBA, and strategy. And so, and I was a finance major, so I understood the money. And so I love doing analysis, and I will wear a spreadsheet out.
Hmm. Were there any, because it sounds like you're like, wow, this is right in my wheelhouse. Everything that I like and I enjoy and I'm good at applies to this. Were there any challenges or obstacles that you had at that time that you're saying, I love all of this, but here are some things that I don't either like or things that I really need to work on to overcome?
Nope. My problem was I mean, I'm being frank, is that I was good at all of it. And so
I love that.
my admins used to get upset because I do all my own stuff because I just do it quick, right? And then so I used to train the analysts at JLL, and then and I wasn't the kind of person that I would say, well, I'm just going to let the analysts look at the numbers. I went through every cell because it was on me to, when I walked into a client, to make sure that I understood what we were telling them was the right thing to do. And so, if it wasn't it wasn't like, I don't know, man. It was like I hit my stride when I hit commercial real estate. It fit all of my aptitudes and interests.
And so you're there so how long were you at JLL?
About 4 years, and then we left and started a company called Kellogg. Me and my classmate and friend left and started Kellogg Partners,
Okay.
which
And
we met at Kellogg, and we started Kellogg Partners.
and and this is your own firm. Is it a subsidiary of another company or just
Oh,
jumped out on your own?
I mean, it's really the predecessor to Greenwood, but it was our own company. And he was, he had run a bunch of big accounts at JLL, and we actually got national press. It was like, two black guys started a company, and we were, both engineering majors. He went to West Point, and we both went to Kellogg, and we got national press, and which was, it tells you at the lack of diversity in the industry that two guys opening up a shop in Atlanta got national press.
Mm-hmm. Were there any different challenges that you had? Because I'd imagine, you're coming from a structure like JLL and you're doing that, but now you're starting from, I won't say it's from scratch, but you're building something up. Were there any challenges that you faced
Well,
when you're
let's
doing
just
that?
say there's structural challenges inside of one of the big firms as well that
Mm-hmm.
many folks face. When we stepped out, we actually pitched for it was a large regional organization. I won't say the name of it, and they put up a 2 million square foot portfolio in Atlanta, and we pitched against the top three, JLL, CB, and Cushman. When we got done, the head of real estate and the chief administrative officer said, they gave us a standing ovation, and they said, good news or bad news? Oh, what's the good news? You guys are head and shoulders above anybody else we interviewed. What's the bad news? You're a small firm. And if you guys go, we have some relationships with some of these bigger firms. And he said, if I were to give you this work and you mess up, I get fired. If I give it to one of the bigger firms and they mess up, it's their fault. He said, I'm just being straight. He said, if you guys will go back and get a card with any of the big firms, we'll award this to you today. And we said, well, we already left those firms. We're not trying to do that. So we will have to say no. So that hurt, because 2 million square feet, man, of office and retail, that would have been a nice one to roll with.
How long did it take you to actually think about what they said? Because it sounds like from now, in hindsight, you're like, nope, we crossed that path. But was there a tug there? No, just
Nope. We immediately said no. I mean, so to me, most things are cut and dry. So we said no, we're not going back to a big firm, and if we can't, get there being ourselves, then we can't get there.
I love that. So how long was that firm going, and what were the other steps there? Because you're going up against the big players, you're doing these things. Like what were the steps of success that you achieved?
So that firm went through a few iterations. We started that in 2001. It's now the Atlanta entity of Greenwood. So we changed the name to Greenwood CRE Atlanta. So that firm is still in existence.
Okay.
Up until 2021, they had that name, and we went through the what do you call it, 2008, when the market downturn, and well, I'll say this: me and my partner got recruited to Grubb and Ellis. He was the president of the Eastern region of Grubb and Ellis, and he asked me to come with him. The firm never went out of existence. 2 years later, we left, and I ended up at Johnson Controls Global Workplace Solutions, but the firm never went out of existence. And then I actually enticed my wife, because I was flying around the world. I'd say, hey, and during that downturn in the market, we did a lot of REO work. And I'd say, hey, can you go, you're not an agent, but can you go open this space up and leave it open and go back and close it? And after a while, I said, could you just get your license? And next thing you know, can you get your broker's license? So next thing you know, she's been my business partner for 14 years. And so when I was off running around the world, she ran the company. I came back in, and I did a stint at Sodexo, did a stint at H.J. Russell, and then that company has just kept moving.
So when all this time that you're growing things, and then you mentioned that you're doing a stint here, a stint there, what was that thought process like for you when you're deciding when to throttle back, or pivot, or go there? Like what is your decision making process? Because you're a very analytical person. You can get into the minutia, but I also see a very holistic person too, where you're taking into account all the factors involved. Walk me through your decision making process when you're making a big decision.
So in 2008, when the market was tanked and brokers were losing their jobs and leaving the industry in droves, I got approached. For whatever reason, I got approached by a bunch of headhunters, and they were like, "We want you to be the head of real estate of this company and this company." And then my dear friend Craig Robinson sent a headhunter my way, and they said, "We want you to go do global solution development for these huge companies. That's facility management, project management, transactions, and lease administration. And these are, $150 million a year contracts. You're taking over their entire portfolio." And I said, "Hey guys, I know nothing about facility management." And so they said, "No, we still want to interview you." So I get to the interview, I make it through this 2 or 3 rounds. And then I get to the final interview. Well, they said, "We want you to come up to Milwaukee for the final interview." I said, "You do know I don't know anything about facility management, which is a large part of this." I said, "Are you sure you want me to come up there?" "Yes, we'll pay for it. Come up here and meet us." Go up there and meet him. I'm in an interview. Guy, we're about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. He goes, "I'm hiring you." I said, "You do know I don't know anything about facility management. I told you that at the beginning of the interview." He said, "I know." He said, "But you're a quick study. You'll get it." So 3 months later, my first project was the biggest project in the whole company. I said, "Well, who am I gonna, be next to work on this with, to learn from?" They said, "No, you're running it." I said, "I hadn't had any training." They said, "You're running it." And I got through that. We were successful. And next thing you know, I got all the big projects. And they were like, "You're one of the best we've ever seen." I was like, "Wow. Okay." So yeah, it was, so for me, that job was in the middle of the recession we still had our business going, and it was a nice paying job with benefits. And I had 2 kids in school, in private school. And so having that ability to weather the recession and to also have our real estate business still going, to me, made sense. And I was learning a lot more about real estate. So I got to see how the big firms analyze, estimate, and price all of their services. And so we were competing against JLL and CBRE for, you name the top 50 companies in the world. I was competing against those guys. So to me, I was learning and earning.
So there's a couple things that stand out. Number one, that you kept saying and reiterating, I don't know how to do this, but they saw those transferable skills or the fact that you've been able to have so much success in your prior ventures and your current venture at the time. So the fact that they saw that and you were able to, hit another home run, that's good on them. It's good on you, but it's good on them too for seeing that.
One guy told me he'd been there 30 years. He said, "You're an interesting guy." I said, "Why?" He said, "We keep throwing you in the deep end of the pool, and I don't know how you keep getting out." He said, I said, man, I said, I don't know if it's the engineer in me or it's the West Texas, fight. I don't know what it is. I said, but I like a challenge. And, and so it was, I don't know. And and I'm very transparent, Dustin. So, I always tell people what I can or cannot do, and I make sure that they're clear on it. And I'm like, you do know that I can't do that, or I'm not good at this. And if you still want me to work on it, I can, but you need to be, you've been warned.
Yeah,
and
you're level setting the expectations. Like,
yeah. And and that served me well. That's just how I'm the same person you see at work as you see it at the grocery store. So just very transparent.
That's great. So that's really cool. I didn't know about that part. And now I'm thinking, you said learning and earning. Now you have another tool in your tool belt from doing that and knowing all those things. So now you can bring that to what you currently do, because now you see how that rolls up into the performance of an asset.
Yep. And, and I had to put together one, you had to read like a 300 or 400 page RFP. Then we would put together a 90 or to 100 page response to that. Sometimes I think one was 200 pages. And so when it comes to responding to corporate RFPs for services, been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
Well, you mentioned a couple times some of the people that you've worked with and partnered with. Your wife is your best friend and business partner also, and that's fantastic. That's really cool to hear that. I love that. But you also mentioned some of the people you went to school with. Was there anybody in your life, whether it's even from childhood or your early stages in your career, was there somebody that was a mentor in some way, or anybody that kind of gave you some guidance?
Yeah, I had an engineer whose last name I cannot remember. I can see his face when I was in high school, and I've been trying to figure out how to find this guy, but he really helped me to get organized around pursuing engineering. He was a black engineer out in West Texas for an oil company, and he just really took me under his wing. So if I could find him, I would. And I see his face is as clear as day. And, and that was 40 something years ago. We just had our 40th high school reunion. And then I had a manager at JLL that I really enjoyed, a guy named Frank Mann. He's retired now. And he really showed me what it means to be accountable and responsible and take leadership. We were in a meeting. I had done the numbers. It was a big client, and I just made a mistake straight up, and it was a big mistake in the spreadsheet. And so you got to own your mistakes. And so I had gone through it. Frank trusted me because he's always like, man, your spreadsheets are always immaculate. This is the one time I screwed up, and he didn't check it. So we're sitting there with the client. We're looking at the presentation. And I realized I'm off by several $1 million. And I was like, time out. There's a huge mistake here. Before I could take credit for the mistake, Frank said, that's my fault. I should have checked this. We'll have this back to you here within an hour or two. But I knew what the number should be. So we just talked through it.
Hmm.
And, we leave the office, we get down to the lobby, and I said, Frank, that was my mistake. Um, why did you take the hit? I said, you should have thrown me under the bus. And he said, well, what kind of leader would I be? He said, it's my client, it's my relationship. I'm accountable for, ultimately responsible for whatever we put in front of that client. And he said, I should have checked it. And he said, that makes me look bad. And it's not, and he said, that doesn't help you. And so to me, that just, I don't know, that just stuck in my head of that's how you want, and we've all had managers who pass the buck and pass the blame.
Mm.
And if you're my manager, you are ultimately accountable.
I love that. How old would you say you were at this time
Oh, that was
when that
mid
happened?
thirties. That was
Your
mid
mid
thirties.
thirties.
But
Okay.
and so what you find is that people are afraid of looking bad. They're afraid of admitting mistakes. And so, if I make a mistake, I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna tell you I made a mistake. If I don't know something, I'm gonna tell you I don't know it. And I just, if as human beings we can get over our fear of not knowing or looking bad or making a mistake, the world gets a lot easier.
Mm. And when you have the people around you that you like and you trust, that lessens that fear of mistakes because you're on the team. You're
Right.
doing it
Well,
together.
and here's the thing: we're all human. We're going to make mistakes,
Hmm.
and I have to have space for you to make a mistake, and I have to have space for me to make a mistake. And I used to coach soccer, man, and I tell my players, we were actually ranked like fourth in Georgia before I retired. I'd say, what matters is not the mistake you made. What matters is what you do immediately after you make the mistake.
Hmm. One of the things when I was coaching my son's basketball teams, like early on, I was getting really frustrated with the number of turnovers. This is when they were like 6 years old. This team were all 6 year olds. And I was like, I got so frustrated with the turnovers because, they're all like, pass, pass, pass. And then they get flustered and they don't know what to do. Then they throw it. Then a kid doesn't catch it and it goes out of bounds. And I said, you know what? We're done with that. Just run down the court and throw it at the hoop. Like, you need to shoot the ball. Like this, I remember I told him, like, this is basketball. It's not basketball. Like, you got to put the ball in the hoop. But I felt like they were afraid of missing and being, I'm like, but otherwise you're just throwing the ball out of bounds. James, we didn't lose another game for 2 years. once
Wow.
once I took I mean, again, they're 6 year olds, but once you took that fear of like, oh, I don't know what to do, and the indecision, and it just became a game of run down the court and throw it at the hoop, everything worked out. It was
Well, it's what you have people focus their attention on that matters, and that's what you
yes.
did. And by the way, man, having coached kids from that age, they don't get serious until about 12 or 13. That's when their brains and bodies catch up. So it
Mm.
was fine, but um, as I used to say, man, like you can probably tell, I'm not afraid of taking a shot. So I used to say, coach, I was open when I crossed half court.
Oh, hey, first of all, I'm from Philly, so everybody's open all the time. It's pretty wild.
Yep.
So okay, I want to make sure that we spend some time talking about Greenwood CRE,
Okay.
and what you're doing. And I know you talk a little bit about, that it transitioned from a previous name, but can you talk about Greenwood and how it came to be and your origin story?
Yeah. So we're sitting here in the middle of COVID. And I've got a couple of companies, big companies, reaching out to me saying, "Hey, we'd like for you to come back and work in our shops, and your experience and blah blah blah." And I'm sitting there going, like, there is a hole, there's a missing in our industry. As everybody talks about, it's 1 to 3% African American. All of my friends in the industry, I've watched a lot of people come and go. I've held a lot of licenses for people who didn't make it in the industry. And then a lot of my peers and colleagues and contemporaries, we worked in the big firms and quite frankly hit the glass ceiling and had to go. And I thought there's no, you know, firm that is competing at the corporate services level that has national coverage with offices that looks like us. And I thought, you know, if not me and the people I know, who's going to do it?
Hmm.
and it seems like the people who came behind us, like there's kind of been a drop off as far as like the numbers and how far they get in the industry and where we were able to get back when I was there. So I don't know who's exactly behind us. So we started talking about it. I've been talking about it for years, started talking with some guys, and then we were trying to figure out the name. And we thought, it doesn't need to be Pitts and Co. and Pitts and Associates, or it needs to mean something. And, I mentioned I was at Kellogg, and this was right after George Floyd, and I was the president of the Black Management Association. And you can tell I'm very outspoken and straightforward. And so some of my white classmates called me after George Floyd, and they said, "Man, you were always so straight. Can we talk to you about race?" And I
Hmm.
was like, "Sure." I said, "But we're going to set up a series of calls. We're going to talk about race." I said, "This isn't to make you feel better about race. We're going to talk about race. Like, we're going to get into it. So we got to talk about history." So we had a historian from Tulsa, a white historian. He's a University of Michigan now. He's a Smithsonian historian, and he wrote a couple of books on Greenwood. So we talked about what happened with Greenwood, and it was a fascinating, like you hear about it, but then to read the books and to hear him talk about it and hear how his struggles with even bringing the story to light, like people didn't want to talk about it. And then what really got me, Dustin, was there was a piece in there and some of the research we did, and people said that, Greenwood outside of Oklahoma was one of the richest zip codes in the United States in the early 1920s. Um, and not just black zip codes, any zip code. Tulsa was having an oil boom. Black folks owned land. They had their own businesses. But somebody said what made Greenwood special was not the money and the wealth, but the sense of community and collaboration, that people were helping each other get forward their lives, forward their businesses, like advance. And so my wife said to me, she said, "You got to name this Greenwood, right? Like, it's got to
Hmm.
be about that. It's got to be about making the pie bigger. It's got to be about disrupting the commercial real estate industry." And so it clicked. And so that was we were sitting at the kitchen table. It was about 10 minutes, and that was our entire marketing. Uh, 10 minutes later, I created a logo, which you've seen. And so in about 20 minutes, Greenwood was named and had a logo. So and then we just chose that and ran with it. And so we started April 21st. I'm sorry, April 13th, 2021. We got a call on starting on Tuesday. We got a call from a global, I guess, global 50 firm on Wednesday. They said, "Can we speak to you on Thursday?" And we didn't practice. We didn't have a presentation. We just showed up. We just told them who we were, told them what we could do, what we couldn't do. 3 months later, they hired us as a national supplier. So we kept it moving.
So at that time, how many people were involved in this?
It was just five of us.
Yeah,
Now
but
it's
you,
well
but
over. It's like over 60 now in two and a
yeah,
half
that's
years.
amazing. I'm so impressed. I know I said earlier, I think maybe before we started recording, but it's cool to watch what you've been able to accomplish so far and see where you're going. So you're five people. You go into these meetings. You're like, this is what we are. This is what we're about. This is how we do. So what was the next steps for your growth?
Oh man. So, well, we had to define who we were and what we did. We had to define, our value proposition and the services that we will offer and why someone should hire us. And then, and given that we were all 20 plus year veterans, we all had relationships. So we started letting people know what we were up to. We began to reach out to people that we did know and didn't know and say, "This is what we're doing." Um, and quickly, man, I mean, we started picking up clients, and you'll look at, if you see our logo, it says "Powered by Excellence."
Hmm.
And one of the things that we talked about was that there's no agreement or welcome for people of color in this industry. It just isn't. And so, it's hard to be in here. So if you've been here 20 something years, you got to be resilient. You got to be creative. You got to be hardworking, and you can't take no for an answer. And so, we understand, when we're coming in and we're actually not just going for local one-off transactions, but we're asking for a piece of the pie that's the big boys compete for.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, we're small. We don't have all that technology. We don't have all the dots on the map. So the only thing we can do is outperform. And, you may have heard this growing up as a black man, but, your parents said you had to work twice as hard. I did. Work twice as hard, be twice as smart. So in Texas, we say we got to show up and show out. And so when we show up, man, like no matter how big or small the project is, we give it our all. And it's not just about doing the transaction, but it's about being like adding value. And like I said, solving those business problems through real estate. And so we began to define that and define our story. And it's just kind of grown organically, man. It's been a blast. And I can't, we are, someone said today on our management meeting, they said, like we have so many opportunities in front of us, like wow, like just wow. And so we're looking at how do we structure the company, how do we create support inside the company, so that we don't that we can handle the opportunities in front of us and continue to work with excellence.
How your why and that energy that you brought into this from that, hearing that professor, the historian talk, and how that has become part of your culture, if you will. Are there any ways that you keep that going? Is that anything that you do as far as like building culture and make sure that mindset and that feeling permeates through all of your expansion?
So here's what I'd say. Mindset is key to everything. I mentioned I was a soccer coach, never played soccer, but I had a bunch of Black and Hispanic kids that we outperformed because of mindset. And real quick story, we played against the Syracuse D1 coach and his all-star D1, D2 players in Disney, which is the biggest tournament in the world. 20 coaches were there to watch them. We beat them 7-2.
Ooh.
Nobody had ever seen us before. I had a kid with duct tape on his cleats. And one of the coaches said, I've never seen kids play like this. And he said, what are you teaching these kids? And I said, it's mindset. And so at Greenwood, we, as you know, brokerage is dog eat dog, dog eat dog, right? And I can't stand it. And so if you're here and you're a me person, you got to go. Like that doesn't work. So our culture is collaborative. We're here to make the pie bigger. Everybody here is accomplished. Everybody's smart, but they're also cool. And we realize that, Dustin, I need to handle this small transaction, 1,000 square foot transaction with excellence in my market, so that you can get that 50,000 square foot transaction from the same client in your market, because it's all important to the client. And so if you can't buy into, and I mentioned my players, most kids in soccer take 3 or 4 passes and shoot. We took 20. And I told my kids, I said, if you pass the ball, it doesn't matter who scores. And in that tournament at Disney, typically 2 or 3 kids score in 4 games. I had 9 kids score. Like, that's nuts. And coaches are like, we've never seen anything like this. Like, what is going on? Because we don't care who scores. We're just supporting each other, moving the ball. And so that's really, we bring that into our culture here at Greenwood. And there's just times where, it's not like, well, if I'm working on this, what's my split? What's my fee? What's this? It's what do we need to do to take care of the firm, the team, the client?
With what you're doing right now, and as you're expanding into other markets, right? Because what markets are you in now? I know a couple of them, but I don't want to.
Man, Atlanta, Denver, Dallas, LA, Miami, New York City, Philly, DC, Baltimore, Memphis, Nashville. I'm probably missing some. We're in 22 states. And then there's some tertiary like we're doing some projects right now in Jacksonville and Tampa. And then, I just did something over in Birmingham. So, and we'll tell people we're not in Idaho or Wyoming, like we're just not there. And so we're in your major cities.
Are there any challenges that you face in like cultural, regional differences, or is everybody same page everywhere? Like you guys have your calls and everyone's on the same
People,
page.
people are people, and if we do a good job vetting people to come
Mm-hmm.
in, then you have to have a certain mindset to be a part of Greenwood.
Yeah.
And we've talked to people that didn't have that mindset. They were more transactional versus relationship oriented, and they just weren't fit.
That the whole concept of, hey, we're in this together. Like it's not about the credit. It's not about these things. We're a unit. We're a team. We're doing this together. Was that when in your mind did that first start to that ethos come into your world? Is that something that you got early on, or is it something that was been developed over the years?
Yeah, I've always been that. I've always been that guy. Like that's just been. I don't know if that's how my parents raised me, but I've always had that mentality of teamwork. I always feel like the team. I think a team of people will always. We were beating, as I mentioned, D1, D2 players, like and beat them badly. And a lot of my kids did go to college, and they went to like smaller schools, but we beat those boys like they stole something.
Mm.
And so for me, I couldn't start a company or be a part of a company that was a me first company. It had to be team. So that was like as I had talked to people about what we were creating, we said we have to create a different model to be successful, because if we use the same model that's already out there, that's all about like, I got to take something out of your pocket, Dustin, for me to make more. If that's the model, it doesn't work anyway, and it certainly is not going to work for people of color, for Black
Mm.
folks. Crabs in a bucket, we call it in Texas.
I'm very, very familiar with with the expression, and yeah, it's a thing. So
Yep.
when you are thinking about your next steps of Greenwood, and as you're expanding, you're doing things, and I really love what things that you're saying about focusing on the team, focusing on the client, focusing on excellence in the moment, and perhaps this relates back to your engineering background. How do you balance thinking long term, midterm, short term?
So, it's interesting.
And maybe it's a time, and I just want to like clarify. So I'm just throwing that big old
Yeah,
question
yeah,
out there.
yeah.
But like, how much time do you spend thinking long term goals versus the midterm and short term? Like, what's your
So, a lot of it's, as much as we can, we want to be strategic. And then, I mean, a lot of it is becoming reactive just because, like, we're getting phone calls from big companies saying, we want to work with you.
Mhm.
And so now we're having to be strategic from the long term of how do we grow smart? How do we learn? How do we put in the infrastructure to service that? Because being a broker is one thing, but managing corporate business is a whole different thing. And I learned to do corporate business at JLL. And then I saw how the sausage was made at Johnson Controls. And I would put together a 300 and something person team with the technology, and I'd have a 5-year budget for them. And here's what they're going to make. And here's how we're going to pay them. And here's the middle layer of management. And here are the people who do stuff. So we think about all that, and we have a great COO and a great CFO, both with MBAs, super sharp, and they keep us on track strategically, and they make sure we get stuff done. Now I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring under my desk, man, but he is cutting some logs under there.
No, I haven't heard that. I'm this is so. But how old's your dog, by the way?
He's 12, but we run every day. We ran 6 miles this morning, and he is quite the athlete, but he is getting his snooze on.
Well, he's earned those snores then.
Yeah.
So when you think about your journey, and it sounds like, and I know there was probably been ups and downs. Like there's always, we're human. There's things that where we zigged when we wish we would have zagged, but and so not necessarily regrets, but if there's anything that you could go back at any point in your journey and tell yourself, earlier on, is there any advice that you would give yourself, or say, hey, look out for this pothole, or hey, when you make this left, you may want to slow down a little bit because there's this hazard around the corner? Is there Anything like that you would tell yourself?
Man, it's funny. I goofed around in college. So I was national merit, blah, blah, blah. I was seventh in my class, full academic. I goofed around in college. First 3 years, I played basketball every day and didn't hardly go to class. And so I basically, the last 2.5 years of college, and it took me, was it 5 years, 4.5, 5 years to get out. Last 2 years, I had to go back and catch up with all the stuff, the beginning engineering that I basically missed. And so so I used to procrastinate, which I don't do anymore. And so that was something that I lost time and energy on. It didn't hurt me because I got a bunch of job offers, but my GPA suffered. And, I probably put my parents through a bunch of stress with with my lack of grades. And then I didn't do that in grad school. Like I nailed it. Like I actually went the other way. I hardly did anything in grad school. I worked out and I studied. And I would go out one night a week, and I didn't do much of anything else because I was determined to get it right. Anything else? I wish I had gotten my law degree. I actually really, really do like contracts. I wish I had found commercial real estate sooner, yeah, I mean, but I'm one of those people, man, that like, I don't want to be the victim of my own choices. So if I make a choice, I live with it. I take accountability for it. And I regrets are, crying over spilled milk. So pretty much, man, if I do something, I'm happy I did it. I just kind of look forward, try not to look backwards.
Yeah. No, I'm all with that. And I understand that. It's one of the things, like, I like to learn, and, life is the best teacher. Right. And so having those experience and doing that, but I think it's really valuable to also learn from other people's experiences, because sometimes somebody else can say something, even though you didn't go through it, it resonates. And like, yeah, you know what? I either do that or I did do that. And maybe I could make better decisions going forward based on that information. That's why I ask, not like, not like, where'd you mess up? Where'd you go?
No. And I mean, I don't think I would, sometimes I think I wish I'd have come up with the model for Greenwood 20 years ago, but I don't think that there was the timing wouldn't have been right. The timing just wouldn't have been right. And I will tell you that, today you'll see a lot of heads of real estate that are, not white males, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference when they say, we'd like to see a more diverse team. And, we don't want anyone to give us work because we're Black. We're just good at what we do. We, like Tiger Woods didn't want to be the best Black golfer. He wanted to be the best golfer. He happened to be Black. And so we just didn't get the opportunity in the past to do what we can do, show what we can do. And so, I'm happy. I'm really happy where we are. I'm happy that, that in the middle of COVID, we just took the chance that we say, well, we're already working on Hollywood Squares. Let's go for it. And, and if it had failed, okay, we would have learned something from that, but it's still going, and I don't see it, I don't, knock on wood. But we're going to keep pushing and keep growing.
Well, very impressive. Everything that you've been able to do so far. And like I mentioned before, I'm very excited to see where you take it next. And yeah, I don't see you slowing down anytime soon. Is there anything that you want to leave, make sure that I give you the space to say anything that you want our listeners to hear or know?
Well, I would say this, part of our mission is disrupting this commercial real estate industry. And that's not just working for clients, but that's reaching out, being on podcasts like this, speaking at CCIM, working with HBCUs. And, I would just say that it's important that we give back in this industry, and I love what you're doing with BCREN, that we make connections, that we make real, that we strengthen, we start relationships and strengthen those relationships. And so for me, it's about giving back. It's about teaching, mentoring, And, I just hope that invite other folks to do that as well. And it's a great industry. We just have to make sure that people, and with Greenwood, we want to make sure that, and I will say this, it was started by African Americans, but we're diverse, man. We got white, Black, Asian, Latina, just old, young, and we want to create the firm that we wish we would have worked for. And so it's not, you don't have to be Black to work at Greenwood, but you got to welcome all people, and you got to value and respect all people and what they bring to the table. So that's kind of what we're about.
Well, having those values in your company and you as a person, the future's bright. So James, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Continued success. Kudos on everything. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Tools, Talents, and Techniques. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. And if you did find value in the episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform, leaving a review, and sharing with your network. We have an amazing lineup in the coming weeks and months with some very impressive leaders and some of the heaviest hitters in business who are making a positive impact in the world. So stay tuned for more exciting episodes and special features coming up. We appreciate your ongoing support and look forward to welcoming you back next time on Tools, Talents, and Techniques.